When you look at this idea of coaching, the wonderful thing about coaching is that we all can do it. We all can use our natural skills and talents in some way to help others step up their performance, advance their careers, see their work, their lives through fresh eyes. I'm hopeful that we can use the next 45 minutes to explore how you might enhance your natural giftedness to do great coaching. We've looked so far at some of the fundamental principles of coaching, and I've just been so thrilled with the emails and the responses I've received from you about your interest in coaching. I'm delighted to have this last session to really focus on this idea of what you need to do, the skills to do great coaching. We like to talk about great coaching as a process that really happens first and foremost from the inside out. The challenge is that coaching is never some nifty set of interpersonal skills that you can take off the shelf and simply use in your dialogues and conversations with others. While we all can coach, coaching requires something significant of us. It requires a significant personal investment. Great coaching always requires that we give something of us. We give some of that very best of us, what's inside us, and bring that into the coaching conversation. Coaching is not just some nice, interesting dialogue or conversation. If you look at coaching at its very essence, coaching is an intense dialogue in which the talent, the person being coached, really is able to see new options, new possibilities for himself or herself, strike out and create a new path forward in some way. If this is indeed true, and if coaching is a discipline, do we who coaches not owe it to the talent, the person being coached? Do we not owe them our very best work? And do we not owe it to them that we really prepare ourselves well for these conversations? This webinar today is all about that. It's all about how we as coaches can invest in ourselves, how we as coaches can sharpen our edges, and how we can bring our very best gifts and talents into the coaching conversation. The cool thing about this is that, like other disciplines, great coaching can be learned. These are observable, learnable sets of approaches and attitudes that all of us can learn, and we can use these to augment our natural interpersonal and natural coaching talents. Today, I'd like to talk to you about 3 core coaching skills. These 3 coaching skills you can use, every one of us can use these to dramatically enhance and improve our coaching ability. The first one is to listen like a coach. The second one is to think like a coach. And the third is to speak like a coach. I'm going to spend some time today on each one of these 3 core coaching skills. Let's start with this idea of listening like a coach. There's a quote that I love from Winston Churchill. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. Now, not often do we really equate the idea of courage and listening. But if you search your heart of hearts, my guess is you'll find there are many times when you really don't want to hear what the other person has to say at the deepest level. It actually takes a lot of courage to hear what people really want to say. Often what people really want to talk about is laden with emotion. It's laden with disappointment. It's laden with uncertainty. Quite frankly, great coaches show tremendous courage when they really listen. Now, my guess is most of you have taken some kind of listening programs and training in the past. The term active listening probably is one that is familiar to you. When you think about active listening, what active listening is the idea of feeding back to the person what you heard so the person can confirm that you really heard what they had to say. Today, I'm going to encourage you to look and listen beyond that, to think about the way coaches listen as something that's even beyond active listening. The quote that you have on the screen right now talks about the idea that listening is far beyond the words, but true listening is listening to what is really being conveyed, the feeling, the whole, the part of it. Let me explain further. There are some key elements that coaches listen for. In our workshops, often we will do this as an experience. We'll have the facilitator coach have a coach-like conversation with somebody else in the room. And then all the workshop participants will listen for different things. They'll listen for these six things I'm going to go through with you now. First and foremost, they'll listen for values and beliefs. I was asked once, what percentage of the time did I think coaching involved values and beliefs? And I thought about it for a bit. Hadn't been asked the question before. And I quickly came to the conclusion that all coaching involves values and beliefs to some degree. Much of coaching simply is to help people remember and to clarify what their core values and beliefs are all about. And if you look back in your experience in any coaching that you've done, my guess is you would agree with me that to be successful and to have sustained change in the coaching process, any of that change needs to be directly associated with core values and beliefs. In my own experience as a leadership coach, I've never seen a leader make a substantial, significant, sustained change in their performance, in their behaviors, in their practices, in their attitudes, unless that was closely connected to what was truly important to them. Great coaches listen for strengths and gifts. Strengths and gifts are really the fuel that helps change really happen. When we listen for what people are really good at, what their natural talents are, we really help them identify what is going to help them accelerate change and actually boost that change. Now, often when we're listening for strengths and gifts, we also can hear about talents that are being held in exile, talents, gifts, and strengths that are not yet being used. Coaches listen for aspirations. We listen for where the talent really wants to go. What is the best future that they can imagine? In their heart of hearts, what do they really want to do with their lives, with their work, with their leadership? They may not even have great clarity around that, but in the coaching conversation, as we listen to it and as we feed this back to the talent, we help them at least see the pathway that they want to be on. Great coaches listen for emotion. Now, not all of us are psychologists. I'm not a psychologist. But emotions are always at play in coaching as well. Think about an emotion as, in simple terms, being happy, sad, glad, mad. Emotions are always an indicator of very fertile ground for coaching. So when we listen for emotions, when we listen for happy, sad, glad, mad, we're listening for areas where there's heightened emotions, and almost always where there's heightened emotions, it's very fertile ground for coaching. Great coaches listen for inconsistencies. They listen for times when the words and the music just don't go together. When you're in a coaching conversation, the talent is sharing their story with you. As you listen to their story, and it is just their story, as you're listening to their story, and as we hear inconsistencies, places where the story doesn't make sense, where things don't connect, where the words and the music do not go together, this is our opportunity to feed back to the talent these inconsistencies and help them repair their story, help them create a bigger story, help them create a story that has more consistency with their own work, with their leadership, with their lives. I love this quote from Scott Peck, that doubt is often the beginning of wisdom. Often when we're able to listen for these inconsistencies, we're able to sow seeds of doubt, which does have a negative connotation, but has a very positive impact in the coaching relationship. And lastly, as coaches, we listen for what's not being said. Coaches, great coaches, are always keenly interested in what the talent is not talking about. Are they not talking about their failures? Are they not talking about their boss? Are they not talking about aspirations, their fellow workers, their colleagues, their customers, their current work, their current challenges? We listen for what's not being said. If you're like me, there's a kind of a natural inclination that you have to avoid talking about some of the most difficult things that are happening in your life at the moment. Some of the things you don't have a good answer for, some of the things that concern you, some of the things that are associated with fears, and some of the things that are associated with maybe some of your deepest needs. Now again, you don't need to be a psychologist to be a great coach, but you do need to listen for those areas that the talent is naturally avoiding. And we can be very helpful by listening for those and confronting the talent with those areas. So secondly, coaches think differently. I would like to take you through a few points that will encourage you to monitor and adjust the way that you think when you are in the coaching role. Love this quote from Dr. King. Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There's almost universal quest for easy answers, half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. Great coaches never come into the coaching relationships with pat answers, with easy-to-understand models, with a way that a solution for every problem or challenge that the talent raises. Great coaches open their minds to new ways of thinking. The first thing they think about is this. It is not about you. It is not about the coach. Most of our lives, if you're a healthy human being, it is very natural to have a high degree of what I call enlightened self-interest. As we go through our work, as we go through our days, as we interact with our families, most of us have a high degree of self-interest. We're looking after ourselves. We're interested in ourselves. We're interested in learning, growing, developing, serving, whatever it means to live out our lives as humans, as managers, as professionals, as fathers, as mothers. We have this healthy idea of self-interest. Great coaches put this aside. Great coaches will subordinate this in the coaching relationship, and they will make it absolutely about the talent. When they're thinking, they are not thinking about how cool they are as a coach. They're not even thinking about how they can be a great coach. What they're thinking about is this: how can I be the most ardent advocate for the talent? In this moment, what can I do to really commit myself to this, to the talent? It is through thinking this way that we're able to bring our very best into the coaching relationship. Secondly, the second idea about thinking like a coach is great coaches always see the talent at their very best. They're looking for the best talents and aspirations, the most noble part of the talent. If you're like me, and my guess is this is a very common human trait, is that we all have a natural judgmental spirit. We have a critical spirit. It's very easy for us to see the flaws in other people. We do it all the time. Coaches put that aside. Coaches quell and suppress that natural part of themselves that is a critic, that is judgmental. And I'm not saying you need to change your entire demeanor in life and never, ever judge other people and never be critical. It is part of our nature. What I'm saying is that in the coaching relationship, we need to see the talent, people at their very best. And the wonderful thing about this is it changes us. Appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well. You know, when we take an appreciative approach in a conversation, in a coaching conversation, when we see people at their very best, when we suppress our natural judgmental spirit, we actually start to rewire our brains. The neuroscientists will tell us that we create new neural networks, and so that process becomes increasingly natural for us. It becomes a natural skill. That's why great coaches do not have to discipline themselves to see the best in others. They do it so frequently, it becomes hardwired in their brain. And so that's what this quote really means, this Voltaire quote really means to me. What is excellent in others belongs to us as well. When you talk about people who do coaching as a large part of their work or their career, and they talk about this fact that they in fact learn and grow often more than the talent. This is one of the key examples of that. Thirdly, coaches are always thinking about what's possible. It is the idea that I like to call wishful thinking. If you could have anything you wanted, what would that be? Coaches are never satisfied with the status quo for the talent. They're always interested in what can be different, what can be better, what can be bigger, what can be greater, what can be more. Sometimes a coach will almost come across as a perennial nag. It is because great coaches are never satisfied with the status quo. They always want to help the talent see something different, be better, be greater, have more performance, more satisfaction, more career success. So when you're thinking about what is possible, you're thinking like a coach. When you naturally are wishful in your thinking, you're thinking like a coach. And fourthly, what coaches are thinking about is the now. What is most helpful right now? In most everything we do in life, we're very temporal in our thinking. We're always thinking about projects and over time and what do I do and when do I need to do this and cause and effect. Great coaches recognize one thing. All they have is this one moment ahead of us. I have this conversation and I have one moment in now, right now, and in that moment, what is the very best thing that I can do to serve the talent? One of the things that distinguishes a great coach from somebody who is still learning to be a great coach is this fact that they cannot waste and they will not squander the now. In this next moment, what can I do? Can I provide the talent some feedback, a question, an affirmation, a confrontation, an insight? Maybe nothing at all, but great coaches think in the now. The third skill is to speak like a coach. Coaches simply speak differently. Think for a moment of the hundreds of thousands of words that come at you every week. Think back on all the conversations that you've been part of, all the words that have come at you, all the pieces of advice, all the dialogues, all the confrontations, all the little snippets in all the major lectures. And think for a moment, if you would please, which ones have really mattered? Which ones have really had some kind of influence on you? My guess is, if you look back over your life, over your career, there's probably been a handful of conversations that have really had an impact on you. There's probably been just a handful of comments, a handful of lectures, a handful of lessons that you've learned from other people that have had a real impact on you. The question that faces all of us who choose to coach is this: do our words really matter? Does our voice have power? Are we going to be in that handful of dialogues, of comments, of conversations that really impact other people? I love this quote. As it is the characteristic of great wits to say much in few words, so small wits seem to have the gift of speaking much and saying nothing. One of the great mistakes we make as coaches is this idea that we always have to be saying something. We always have to be saying something. It is because of that we blur our big words. We blur our voice. A grand old master coach told me one time, said, Gregg, If you have nothing to say, say nothing. Make your words mean something. When we look at this idea of how coaches speak, I would encourage you to look really at the quality of the words as opposed to the quantity. Great coaches speak from their adult to the talent adult. I'll explain this in a bit more detail. There are 3 conversational states that we're all in all day long. We're all in one of these 3 conversational states. Those of you who are familiar with the idea of transactional analysis out of the 60s will recognize this idea from that system of thinking. Think about these 3 states as being dependent upon and driven by a sense of responsibility. When you're in your parent, you are taking up lots of responsibility for yourself and, quite frankly, responsibility for others. When you are in your adult, you're taking just responsibility for yourself. When you're in your child, you're taking almost no responsibility at all. And quite frankly, we all move up and down and throughout these 3 conversational states all day long. When we're in our parent, when we're at our very best, we're the nurturing parent and giving advice and trying to be helpful to others. The more negative elements of that is when we're overly directive, controlling, and critical. That comes out of our parent. When we are in our adults, we feel very much responsible for our own stuff, our own work, our own lives, and this is the big one, and we believe other people are responsible for their own lives, their own job, their own careers, and they have all the tools necessary to do so. They're quite capable of managing their own work, their jobs, their careers, and their lives. They're resourceful. We could be helpful to them, but they have all they need to run and manage their own lives. When we are in our child, when we are at our best at our child, that's what we call our playful child. So when you're very playful and kind of just letting it all go, probably in what we would call your playful child. The more negative aspect is when you are a rebel, when you are a victim. This is the more negative child. So as coaches, we're normal human beings. We move up and down and throughout these 3 conversational states all day long. The talent does as well. Here is the magic. Great coaching involves the coach always speaking from his or her adult, in other words, being responsible for your own stuff, and speaking to the other person's adult. Now, whether or not they are in their parent or in their child or in their adult is immaterial to the coach. The coach encourages the talent to take responsibility for their own work, their own lives, by treating them as if. They will speak to the talent's adult and only the adult. Because once they start speaking to the child or once they start speaking to the parent, then they cannot coach. Coaching only occurs when the talent feels responsible for their stuff and the coach equally feels responsible for their stuff. Another important element of coaching, of speaking like a coach, is coaching through confrontation, constructive confrontation. It's rare that you would go through a full coaching relationship and the talent would not benefit from the coach having the courage to constructively confront the talent in some way. It is essentially this. As a coach, if you think it, say it, with one caveat. You recall in an earlier webinar when we talked about the idea of noble intention. Noble intention means what you're doing not to get something off your chest, you're not doing it to serve any of your needs, but you're doing it for one reason and one reason only. You're doing it to serve the other person. So if the words and the music to you do not go together, sharing that with the talent is a constructive confrontation. You might say something like, I think you are better than this, a constructive confrontation. I think you are selling yourself and others short, a constructive confrontation. I love this Einstein quote. If you are out to describe the truth, leave elegance to the tailor. Leave elegance to the tailor. This is a good message for us who coach. The message to us is this, don't varnish it. Just with noble intention, just simply put it out there and confront the talent with them. If it is an adult-to-adult conversation, and as long as you can let go of it and give it to the talent as a gift and let it go, the talent can take it or leave it as they wish. One of the interesting things about this idea of coaching is that we never ever really get there. Great coaching is in fact a career-long journey. I would encourage you to think about this idea of coaching not so much as a destination. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that any of us ever get to a place where we could call ourselves a great coach. It's not so much a destination, but it really is a journey. I've known many wonderful coaches over the course of my career, and when I think back on each one of them, I would suggest that not one of them would consider themselves a great coach. What these wonderful men and women did, however, was they saw great coaching as much more a pathway. It was a choice that they made every day to get on the road towards great coaching. I shared with you today these 3 coaching skills. My hope is that you will take each one of these 3 and choose to put them into play every day, because we never get there as a great coach. We get on the pathway. Coaching is much more about what we choose to do every day, what we choose to do in our relationships with other people, as opposed to what we are. Being a great coach is not something that we wear as a name tag. It's not something that shows up in our business card. It's really a choice that we make every day in terms of how we interact with other people. It's also my hope that you think about these 3 big ideas that I talked about today. How we listen like a coach, think like a coach, and speak like a coach. And decide to care enough about the people that you coach that you'll invest in yourself. And you'll look at each one of these elements and look at ways that you can sharpen your edge. You can enhance your natural talent to do great coaching. Great quote from Henry Mintzberg from McGill University. We use this often in our work. Leadership, like swimming, cannot be learned by reading about it. Now, the real cool thing about coaching is you don't have to wait until you have some formal coaching program, formal coaching relationship. Every day and every hour, you have the opportunity to coach. Every one of us do. We have the opportunity to be more coach-like in a 30-second conversation in the hallway. In that conversation in the hallway, we can listen like a coach, we can think like a coach, and we can speak like a coach. And we never know. It just might be that hallway conversation when we were very coach-like that will be in that handful of conversations, a handful of conversations and dialogues that really impact that person's life, their career, their work. I want to personally thank you for your attention in all of these webinars, all 6 of these webinars. It has really been a privilege for me to share some of my ideas and our thinking at Bluepoint. I would encourage you to be thinking about this idea of the conversation, that there is nothing more special between 2 people than a conversation that really matters, a conversation in which we look at ourselves differently. When we have that kind of conversation, especially when we have it around performance, around careers, around futures, around challenges, around opportunities, especially as they relate to one's job and one's work, it is a tremendous gift that we give people. I would encourage you to be thinking about this idea of coaching as something that is very natural between people. But it's also a choice. It's a choice that we make to walk down pathways and to have conversations that are often unusual. They are conversations that other people will not have. They're often conversations that require the very, very best of us. And they're awesome conversations that mean we are going to invest and take risks on behalf of other people.